And greetings to all of you to our Bhagavad Gita class for the Vedanta Society of Greater Austin. I'll begin as always with a chant. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Vasudeva Sutan Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. Om, O Mother Bhagavad Gita, we meditate on you who were made known to Partha, Arjuna, by the Lord Narayana himself. You who were included in the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. You, the goddess who rains down the nectar of non-duality, Advaita, in 18 chapters, the destroyer of relative existence. We worship Krishna, world teacher, the son of Vasudeva, the supreme delight of Devaki, and the slayer of the demons, Kamsa and Chanur. We adore that supremely blissful Madhava, by whose grace the mute are made eloquent and the lame are enabled to walk over mountains. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So last time, I believe we went through verse number 30. Last time was a recorded class because I was otherwise engaged last weekend. But now we are back to our usual live streaming of the class. And so we'll begin where we left off last time. That is, we'll begin with verse 31. But first, to give context, let me say that here in chapter 2, as Sri Krishna begins to correct the delusion of Arjuna, he begins first in verses 2 and 3 by insulting him, saying that this is unbecoming of a warrior like you, this unmanliness. It's un-Arya-like. That is, it's unfit for a noble person like you, unmanly, etc. Where did you get this weakness from? And so that he insults the dignity of Arjuna. But again, it's not insulting because Krishna is angry or anything like that. It's insulting in order to wake up a sense of dignity within him. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that Manush, the Sanskrit and Bengali word for man, comes from manhus. That is a consciousness of one's dignity. And so that's a very good, it's not the actual source of the word manush, but it is a very good way of deriving the word. In fact, that's done traditionally in Sanskrit. When you have a Sanskrit word, the theory is that every Sanskrit word can be traced back to a dhatu, a verbal root, and the pratyayas, the prefixes, plus suffixes. But the basic part of the word goes back to verbal roots. But also there was the tradition of taking a word and finding a fanciful way of deriving it to give it a deeper meaning. And so what Sri Ramakrishna said as part of that old tradition of finding a new, not going back to the verbal root, but finding a useful derivation of the word that gives the real sense of what the thing is that you're using the word for. So manush is manhus, one who's awakened to their dignity. So Sri Krishna is trying to bring that awareness to Arjuna, who has collapsed in weakness and in misery. And then he begins, as you know, to teach about the glory of the self from verse 11 forward in chapter 2, to let him know that you are the immortal self. No one kills and no one is killed. You can't be cut, you can't be dried, you can't be burnt, you can't be wetted, etc. But now, in the verses we took last time, Sri Krishna says, even if you don't accept the idea of the eternity of the soul, then even from a pragmatic standpoint, why should you fall into this weakness? Everyone born dies, and everyone who dies is reborn. And that's inevitable. So why should you be completely undone by the inevitable? You accept it. This is the nature of life. Beings die and beings are born again. So do your duty. Don't be overcome by the idea and the foreknowledge of death. Go ahead and do your duty, because death is just part of life. So again, that was an argument saying, Sri Krishna himself says, that even if you don't accept the self as being immortal and so forth, then look at it from this standpoint. Now in verse 31, he comes to another viewpoint. So he's insulted his dignity to try to wake up that manhus, that awareness of dignity. Then the nature of the self, which is his main teaching, the high spiritual teaching. Then this idea that people die anyway, so even if you don't accept the nature of the self, why should you be upset? Now a fourth argument he gives in verse 31 about swadharma. So 31 says, swadharma mapi chavekshya navikampitam arhasi dharmyadhi yuddhat shreyonyat kshatriyasya na vidyate. So here he says, swadharma mapi chavekshya. But even looking from the standpoint of swadharma, and I'll come back to swadharma, what it means in a moment, but he says, okay, I've given these other arguments, but even looking at this question of what you should do from the standpoint of swadharma, navikampitum arhasi, you shouldn't be afraid. You shouldn't shake, literally, vikampitu, like a bhumikampa, an earthquake. So you shouldn't shake. That is, you shouldn't waver in your resolve to do that which is your duty. Then dharmyadhi yuddhat shreyonyat kshatriyasya na vidyate. There's nothing better for a kshatriya like you, a warrior like you. There's nothing better than a dharmic war, a dharmic battle. You're a kshatriya, you're a warrior. You've been trained for this all of your life, and now you have a dharmic fight. That is, a fight which is based on dharma, which is based on righteousness, where you are trying to preserve the correct order of society. This is not, on your part, this is not a war of aggression, where you are greedy and you want more land and you want to take it from somebody else who rightfully possesses the land, that which is the cause of most of the wars throughout history. But this is a righteous war. You are fighting for the proper establishment and protection of society. And so it doesn't get better than that for a kshatriya. That's what a kshatriya is trained for. So how lucky you are that this has come to you. So again, coming back to the word swadharma, that of course is a well-known word in the scriptural literature, a Sanskrit word. Dharma is a much bigger word than any particular English word. In English, we have to use a variety of terms to translate dharma in different contexts. So sometimes we say that it's righteousness, sometimes morality, sometimes it means religion, sometimes it means goodness, doing the right thing, one's correct relationship to society and so forth. But dharma is a concept which is bigger than all of those and contains all of those and much, much more. But swadharma means one's own dharma. That is that which is appropriate to you, that which is appropriate to the individual. That duty, so that's another definition of dharma, is duty. So that duty which is appropriate to you. But even duty is not a big enough term, even for this aspect of dharma or swadharma. Because swadharma means more than just what your duty is, your assigned work and your assigned lot in life. It means the very way that you approach life. It includes your place in life, your way of relating to life, that which you are to do, that which you are not to do. All of that is included within swadharma. And so in classical times, traditional times, when the Gita was written, and up until recent centuries, one's swadharma was defined by the scriptures and by the dharma shastras, the texts, the Hindu law books, which told about according to your caste and according to your stage of life, whether you are a student or a householder, a sannyasi, a vanaprasthi, that is a retired person practicing spiritual discipline, your duty would change. And so society itself defined what your swadharma was. You be born into a certain family, and that would have a certain traditional work that you yourself would follow when you grew up. And so all of that was clearly laid out. So swadharma was something that was just part of the social atmosphere. Nowadays, it's not. Nowadays, society and religion don't define what your duties are. And so the good thing is that people can find that kind of employment, that kind of work, which is suitable to their temperament rather than just where they happen to be born. So you find now Brahmins who are doctors and engineers and business people, and you find Shudras who are professors and other managerial positions and so forth. And so with all of the other castes, because that the structure of society has broken open. And the good thing is, again, that now there's a great deal of social freedom so that people can find that which is appropriate to their nature rather than just where they happen to be born. But there's a cost to that also. And the cost is that many people feel lost in the modern world. They don't know what their swadharma is. They don't know what their place in life is. They don't know what their path in life is. And many people go into a particular field, not because of a love for that field, but because their parents push them into it because that's where they can make good money. And so a person may spend their life doing a job that they don't really feel a calling to, but just because the remuneration is good. And so the idea of swadharma is difficult to find nowadays. Again, traditional times, the good part was that everyone knew what their place was and they just did it. There wasn't any question, there wasn't, you didn't have options, and so nobody even thought about options. Nobody thought that, well, I'm born in a sweeper's family, but I wish I were a Brahmin or something like that. I know it was unimaginable. Nowadays, we have social freedom so that a sweeper a boy or girl can become a great scholar, a great professor. There are even schools in India for training them and untouchables as well to become temple priests. And so we can do anything. That's a good thing. But again, now the society doesn't tell us what our swadharma is. We have to find our swadharma. And that's a much more difficult job, to find that which is appropriate to my temperament. And so the principle which Sri Krishna here is speaking about is still true. So if you have joined the military and you have trained as a soldier, then still a righteous battle, a good battle, is still that which you have trained for. That's what has come to you. And so the principle that he's talking about still works, even though it's difficult for people to find that which is right for them sometimes. I remember once at Mayavati in the Himalayas, when I was posted there back in the 70s and early 80s for 5 years. One day the sweeper, Jailal, he was always very friendly with me. He was friendly to everybody, but especially friendly with me. He was out sweeping the gutter along the walkway at the ashram. And as I was passing him, he said, "Maharaj, my work is very dirty work. I'm always handling very nasty things and getting rid of dirt and everything. But without my work, society couldn't get along." And so I thought, yes, that was the original idea, that the reason for having society divided up was so that everyone had a place. And so that people would know clearly what their work was, so they didn't spend half of their life trying to find where they were supposed to be in life. You just do it. And so again, there are great benefits to the modern liberal society, where people can choose that which is in accord with their nature and with their desires. But nowadays we have to look for our swadharma. So the running translation is, looking at your own dharma, also you ought not to waver, O Arjuna, for there is nothing higher for a kshatriya than a righteous war. So again, this is the new argument that Sri Krishna is bringing in, that, okay, forget these other things temporarily, forget these other things I've said, look at it from the standpoint of swadharma. Then in verse 32, he says, Yadrichaya chopapannam swarga dwaram apavritam sukhina kshatriya partha labhante yuddham idrisham. So yadricha labha santushta, yadrichaya chopapannam swarga dwaram apavritam. Yadrichaya chopapannam, that which has come of itself, which is a door into heaven, an open door into heaven. Sukhinak kshatriya partha labhande yuddhamidrisham. Happy are those warriors who find a battle such as this, which has come of its own, and which is a door into heaven. So the running translation, happy, O Partha, are the kshatriyas who get such a battle, which has come of its own accord and is an open gateway to heaven. So this is an idea that you find in all traditions, except perhaps the Buddhist. I don't know about the Buddhist. It's possibly there also, but I've never seen evidence of it there, because Buddhism rose as a reaction to Vedic Hinduism. But all other traditions, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, the Native American traditions, other Aboriginal traditions, and so forth, it was believed that by fighting in a righteous battle, not in an aggressive battle, not a battle out of greed and trying to sow terror and so forth, but dying in a righteous battle for the sake of dharma, it would open the gates to heaven. So you can see the value of teaching that idea in traditional times, because if a person had to sacrifice themselves in battle where they knew that they could be killed, then what is the use? Why am I sacrificing myself in battle for a king whom I don't even know, I don't even care for, and yet I'm asked to go out and to fight for him in battle against people I have no grudge against. I have no, as we say in American English, I have no dog in the fight. So why should I get into it? No, there had to be a motivation. And so looking at it purely from a pragmatic standpoint, this was a teaching which gave people a motivation to engage in battle fearlessly, because it meant that if you die in a righteous battle, then the gates to heaven are opened to you. Now, I'm not saying that the only reason was pragmatic. I'm saying that even if you don't accept that it may be true, there was at least a pragmatic reason. But then the argument from the standpoint of truth on it in a different context, not in the context of battle, but Swami Vivekananda said, if you are able, if you are able to give up your life in order to save the life of someone else, immediately you will be free. If you give up your life to save the life of another, immediately you will be free, spiritually free. Why? Because that which we hold on to more than anything else is our own life. There's nothing that is so dear to us, nothing that we try to protect as much as our own life. And if I can give that up out of concern for another, then it means that I have cut through the bondage of the ego. I've cut through the bondage of self-preservation in order to give myself up for someone else. And so Swami Vivekananda said that that was true. And he said when his this faithful English disciple Goodwin, J.J. Goodwin, passed away in Utakamun while Swamiji was up in Almora, he said that we have our first martyr. That is someone who died for the cause, not in battle, but in work, which for Swamiji was far more valuable than battle. He said that we have our first martyr, J.J. Goodwin. So, so again here, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna that the happy is the Kshatriya. Let me read the running translation again. Happy, O Partha, are the Kshatriyas who get such a battle, which has come of its own accord, yadrichaya chopabandham, and is an open gateway to heaven. Swarga dwaram apavritam, open gate to heaven. So then he continues in verse 33, Atachetvam imam dharmyam sangramam na karishyasi tata swadharmam kirtincha hitva papam avapsyasi. Atachetvam imam dharmyam sangramam na karishyasi. If, however, if you will not fight in this dharmic battle, this dharmyam sangram, if you won't fight in this dharmic battle, tatasva dharman kirtincha hitva papam avapsyasi, then you will be giving up swadharma, you'll be giving up your swadharma and your fame as well. So here he's coming back to what he first told Sri Krishna in verses 2 and 3 of this chapter, that this is anarya jushtam. It's unworthy of an arya like you to throw down your bow and arrow and sink into the chariot weeping like this. It's unworthy of you. And so here he comes back to that. So if, however, you do not fight this righteous battle, then failing in your duty and losing your reputation, you will incur sin. Papam avapsyasi. It will be sinful for you. So Arjuna, all of this time, has been arguing that I want to take the higher road. I want to take the road of virtue and sacrifice myself and not fight against my kinsmen, not fight against my gurus. Let them kill me. Or if they let me go and live by begging my food. But I can't eat the food that is earned by killing my kinsmen in battle. That I can't do. So this, he's giving, Arjuna was giving all moral arguments for the moral superiority of not fighting. And so justifying his unwillingness to fight on the basis of a higher morality. And so here Sri Krishna is telling him that this fight itself is dharmic. It is a dharmic fight. Again, because as I've said in classes long back when we were in chapter 1, the Pandavas and Sri Krishna had tried everything to avoid war. They tried to negotiate with the Kauravas in order to get back their rightful kingdom, that which was rightfully theirs. They tried to get it back through negotiation. They tried everything. They told them that even if you just give us 5 villages for our 5 families, that itself will be satisfying for us. But the Duryodhana said he wouldn't give them even an inch of land. And so after all negotiations broke down because of the obstinacy of the Kauravas, then there was nothing left but for them to go to war. And so for that reason, it was considered a righteous battle, because they were fighting for the preservation of the correct order of society. Not out of selfishness, because again, they were ready to be satisfied just with the village instead of a whole kingdom, which was rightfully theirs. But even that couldn't be given to them. And being householders, other people depend on them. So if the householder doesn't fight for the protection of society, doesn't stand up for right in society, the dharmic thing in society, who else is going to do it? Society depends upon the righteous householder. The family is the basic social unit. You can't get to a more basic social unit than the family. And so all of our social relationships are based on family relationships. It's the family which is the basic unit and the basic model for all of our relationships. Even our relationships to God are based on the family relationships. And so if the family is not strong, then the society itself begins to fall apart. And the society is strong when the householders stand up for dharma and are ready to protect the proper functioning of society, honesty, truthfulness, righteousness, basic morality. That is dependent on the householder being dharmic. And so, if you fail in your duty, O Arjuna, then you will bring sin on yourself, because your duty, you have your duty as a warrior, and you have your more basic duty, which is the duty of every householder, to uphold dharma. And you being a warrior, your way of upholding dharma is to protect the innocent and to be ready to fight for the preservation of society. And now you're saying you want to do that? After all your lifetime of training, your lifetime of those very gurus that you say that you won't fight against, they're the ones who taught you to come and fight on the battlefield as you're doing now. So here Arjuna thinks that he is appealing to a higher morality, but Sri Krishna knows that he's appealing to his inner weakness, not to a higher morality. So if, however, you do not fight this righteous battle, he says, then failing in your duty and losing your reputation, you will incur sin. So you're not following a higher duty and a higher morality. You will actually be incurring sin by this that you're trying to do. So again, always in studying any scripture, and particularly the Gita, because it is addressed to daily life, the Gita. Everything in the Gita is addressed to daily life. We always have to step back and see, what does this mean to me? I'm not on the battlefield, I'm not fighting a battle, but yes, this life is our Kurukshetra. This life is our Dharma Kshetra, the field of Dharma, where we practice Dharma. It's our Karma Kshetra, the field of action, where through action, we learn and experiment with Dharma and learn how to support Dharma. And it is our Kurukshetra, our battlefield. So it's by doing that which is rightfully ours, our true Dharma, our true Swadharma, that which is my own responsibility in life, by the proper performance of that, there comes virtue, comes the satisfaction of mind, which allows an inner sense of integrity, which allows me to move forward in my spiritual life. Look at the life of Sri Ramakrishna, how many examples there are. And just giving one example, there was Hajra, his nephew, who used to stay at Dakshineshwar, full of himself and full of pride in himself. And Sri Ramakrishna found out at one time during his later years at Dakshineshwar, when the gospel was already being recorded by him, the Kathamrita. He found out that Hajra was not taking care of his wife and children back in his village in Sihor, near Kamarpukur. That he had he was staying at Dakshineshwar, doing nothing, just sitting around and talking to Ramakrishna's disciples and acting like a great sadhaka and trying to impress everybody with his sadhana, and ignoring his wife and children. So Sri Ramakrishna called him and said, Hazara, what are you doing? Don't you have any shame? Who is going to feed your wife and children in the village? Are the neighbors going to do it? And scolded him severely for his neglect of his duties. So if we don't do the things that are rightfully ours in life, our legitimate duties, we become lesser people. We can try to avoid our duties by claiming that we're doing something greater, something more important for humanity. And no, we start with doing that which is closest to us, and then we reach out and do bigger things. But our platform is taking care of the things that are right in front of us, and then including more as we are able. So then he goes on in verse 34. Akirting chapi bhutani kathayishyanti te vyayam sambhavitasya chakirtir maranadatirichyate. So here again, he's come back to that theme of akirti, of the infamy, loss of fame, loss of dignity, which he took up in verses 2 and 3. He says, akirting chapi bhutani kathishyanti te vyayam. People will begin to speak ill of you constantly if you give up this fight. People will speak ill of you constantly. Sambhavitasya chakirtir maranadatirichyate. And for a person who has been honored in society, infamy is worse than death itself. So for a person who has been honored, a person who has had a respectful place in society, to lose their reputation, that's worse than death itself. And so that's why you see in societies like Japan, where they had a different view of things like suicide, if a person was publicly humiliated, then the only honorable thing for such a person to do was harakiri, that is to commit suicide by sticking their sword in their stomach and moving it until they had cut themselves beyond repair. Because it was considered that disrepute, there was nothing worse than that. That came originally from the Confucian idea in China, though in China they didn't have the tradition of harakiri as a formal tradition, but there was the idea of a person following the norms of society in order to assure a good and respectful position within society. And it was believed in the Confucian system that anything that you do which brings ill repute is not primarily harm to you, it's a harm to your forefathers. And that is even worse. And so again, here Sri Krishna is saying that for a person who has become honored in society, there's nothing worse than ill repute. And that's true. You find how many political figures, how many religious leaders, other people at the top of society become humiliated. Nowadays, the culture has changed so that the blow of that has been softened, and yet still it's there. The blow of that has been softened because the idea has spread. In the West in particular, the idea has spread, and in America even more than in Europe. The idea has spread that, well, everybody really is no good anyway. And so if the people find out I'm no good, well, it's just, they find out I'm just the same as everybody else. And so it doesn't really matter. So who cares? That sort of attitude has spread. That is a very new attitude, both in America, in the West, and around the world. In most places in the world still, that sense of personal honor and family honor is very strong. Even if not as strong as before, it's still strong. And there's a reason for that. Because it's that ideal of honor that we're trying to live up to that keeps us struggling to live up to that. If I begin to think, if the idea spreads in society and people on a wide scale basis begin to think, it doesn't matter, everybody's no good, Everybody's just, everybody does all kinds of immoral things anyway. So if I do it, who cares? Nobody's going to do it because everybody's a crook. Everybody's a crook. Everybody's dishonorable. So who cares? The spread of that idea is deadly to society, and you see the effects of it on American society. And so, of course, this text is taking place at a time when the sense of personal honor was extremely high, extremely high. And so Sri Krishna could make these arguments with the greater force than we can make them in present-day America. Yes, in some countries, you can still make the argument, though not as strongly as once. But here, the argument itself is beginning to lose its force. So the running translation says, besides, people will talk of your eternal infamy. And for one held in esteem, infamy is worse even than death. Infamy is worse than death. So again, the Japanese who would commit harakiri, killing themselves rather than being, it was the only honorable way out of a situation where you had been dishonored. The only honorable way out was to kill oneself in a way that society said was honorable. So that, of course, that doesn't translate to other cultures, not to India or to other cultures, but it was in Japan, the socially prescribed and honorable way of getting out of disrepute. That if you did that, then you were showing that you still had some dignity, that you were not just a completely a slave of greed and desire and unconscious impulses and things, that you could take your own life as a man. So in verse 35, he continues the thought, Bhayadranaruparadam mansyante tva muharataha tesham jate bahumato bhutva yasyasi laghavam. So Bhayadranaruparadam mansyante tvam muharataha. So the great warriors, the Maharataha. Maharata had a particular definition, a person who was in control of many chariots. So just like in present-day armies, you have sergeants, and you have lieutenants, and you have captains, and then you have majors, and then you have colonels, and you have generals, and generals of higher and higher rank. And so depending on your rank, you may be just a foot soldier, only responsible for following orders and taking care of yourself, or you may control a small unit of soldiers or a company, regiment, etc. So the Maharata was one who controlled was in charge of commanding a number of chariots in battle. And so these great warriors will think, mansyante, they will think that that you have left the battlefield running out of fear, that you have run from the battlefield out of fear, bhayad, out of fear. Yesham chatvam bahumatu, and those who thought well of you, bhutva yasasi laghavam, you will be thought of lightly. So yesham chatvam bahumato bhutva, those who had thought well of you, yasyasi laghavam, you will be thought of lightly. So these mighty warriors will think that you have retired from battle through fear. Having been highly esteemed by them, you will fall into disgrace. So again, that appeal to Arjuna's sense of dignity. As we progress on the spiritual life, we begin to feel that an inner sense of dignity is growing within us. Not the false dignity which is often criticized in society, where a person stands on their rank, they stand on their all the externals of their position, but they don't have anything inside. That's not real dignity. Real dignity comes from inside. A sense of the innate value of one's inner being. As the closer we get to God, the more we begin to sense feeling of inner dignity arising within us. And so, for such a person, then the idea of infamy, it goes completely contrary to the very nature of your being, the nature of what you feel yourself to be. And so the higher we rise, the more we spontaneously work out of that sense of inner dignity. It's not something we're trying to get and something we're trying to establish. It's something that naturally comes. But for an ordinary person, then that sense of dignity should be instilled so that they have a baseline below which they won't operate. I won't, and you see that in people who say, no, I won't stoop to that. You can offer me $1 million, it doesn't matter, I'm not going to stoop to that level. And you find in more ordinary situations where people say, well, so-and-so is insulting you so badly, why don't you respond in such and such a way? And the person says, no, I won't stoop to his level. He's doing what he does, he's making a fool of himself, and he's showing what kind of a bad person he is. I won't stoop to that level. And so a socially instilled sense of dignity also is very important, because it gives us a baseline that below this, I won't operate. This is, I won't go lower than this. I stand on my dignity, I stand on my sense of dignity, I stand on my family's dignity, I stand on the dignity of my name. All of these things which sometimes in the modern world, some people, especially in the West, say, well, that's all false. That's all just a social construct. Who cares about that? No, we should care about that. It's may be a social construct, but it's something which is constructed for a purpose to keep society at a certain norm so that it doesn't sink. When that disappears, then you're capable of anything. If you have no sense of dignity, if you have no sense of shame, then what's to stop you from doing anything? Nothing. And so even if we haven't risen to the point where we feel an inner sense of dignity, then we should have at least a socially inspired sense of dignity that won't allow me to act in a way which is contrary to that. That is essential. That's not a fake thing. That's not being fake. All of us are just no good, and so why don't we just admit it and live as if we're no good? No, that's the very destruction of society. So these mighty warriors will think that you have retired from battle through fear. Having been highly esteemed by them, you will now fall into disgrace. And so in verse 36, he says, Avachya vadamscha bahun varishyanti tavahitaha nindantas samartyam tato dukkhataram dukim. So avachya vadamscha bahun varishyanti tavahitaha. Those who are your enemies, those who are the opposite of well-wisher, avahita, those who wish you ill. So those avahita, those who wish you ill, they will say many terrible things about you. Avachya vadams, things that should not be said. They will say words that should not be uttered. Unmentionable things they will say about you if you run from the battle. Nindantastava samartyam, and they will criticize your strength, your samartyam, your power, your strength, your ability. They will criticize that. Tato dukkhataram dukim. What could be more miserable than that? What could be a source of greater misery than that? That you run from the field out of fear, and first those who used to honor you, they will dishonor you. People will say that you ran out of fear, and then your enemies, and that's your friends, who will say that, oh, Arjuna now has run away in fear. Your enemies will say even worse things. They'll say many unmentionable things about you. And your enemies will be saying many unmentionable things, decrying your prowess. What can be more painful than that? So again, that is his argument. And so let me do two more verses quickly that sort of or actually not, I just need to do one more verse in order to sort of complete this part of what Sri Krishna is saying. Hato va prapsyasi swargam jitva va bhokshase mahim tasmad yuddhaya yujasva yuddha tasmad uttishta kaunteya yuddhaya krita nischayah. So hato va prapsyasi swargam. If you are killed, O Arjuna, then you will attain to heaven. Jitva va bhokshase mahim. And if you win, if you conquer, then you will enjoy the earth. So one of two things is going to happen. You're going to win or you're going to lose. There's no other choice on the battlefield. So if you lose, then the door to heaven is open for you. You'll go and you'll enjoy long ages in heaven. And if you win, then you get to enjoy the earth. Tasmadu tishta kaunteya. Therefore, stand up, O Kaunteya, O Arjuna. Arjuna again has collapsed to the floor of the chariot, thrown away his bow and arrow, collapsed down to the floor. And so he's saying, Uttishta Kaunteya, stand up, O Kaunteya, Yudhaya Krita Nischaya, being determined to enter into battle. That is, take this determination to enter into this fight, which is a dharmic sangrama, which is a righteous battle with a firm determination. Stand up and fight. So either killed in battle, you will attain to heaven, or being victorious, you will enjoy the earth. Therefore, arise, O son of Kunti, resolved to fight. So here again, Sri Krishna, in this second chapter, you find all of the way through that the tone of Sri Krishna's teaching is heroic. It's a vira bhava, the heroic attitude that Sri Krishna is teaching Arjuna in. Because Arjuna is a warrior, and so that's appropriate to him. But it's appropriate to us, to each one of us as well. And that's why Swami Vivekananda, he always speaks to us in terms which are noble and inspiring and uplifting, and appeal to our heroic nature within. And so Swami Vivekananda really is the Krishna of modern times. As I've said on occasion, Sri Ramakrishna is the Krishna of Vrindavan, the Krishna of the divine Leela. And Swamiji is the Krishna of Kurukshetra. He is the Sri Krishna of Dwaraka and of Kurukshetra, the battlefield. In this way that Sri Krishna instructed Arjuna, inspired him to stand up and to fight and to do his duty, so Swamiji speaks to us today. In the same way that Sri Krishna taught in the second chapter to Arjuna about the nature of the self, that you are the self, the deathless, the birthless self, uncut by weapons, unwetted by water, undried by wind, unburnt by fire. So Swamiji taught us in that same way, appealing to our divine nature. Even when teaching bhakti, Swamiji never lets go of the theme of the divinity of the self. Whether he's teaching knowledge, whether he's teaching karma, whether he's teaching Raja Yoga, or whether he's teaching bhakti. The drone note sustaining all of his words is that idea of the divinity of the self. So here in these verses we did today, you find Sri Krishna appealing to Arjuna's, not to his vanity, but to his sense, because vanity is a negative term. A person who is vain, a person who has vanity, means that they're prideful for the wrong reasons. But appealing to his inner dignity, appealing to his sense of that which is righteous, that which is right, that which is honorable, that he was wanting to do the dishonorable. And so Sri Krishna is saying, no, don't do that, because these will be the results of it. And he ends by saying that papam avapsyasi, you will incur sin by doing this. So I'll stop here. If there is any question, I'll take that, and otherwise we will end.
So Rajendra, you go ahead and ask the question that you're thinking of.
Sure. Namaste, Swami.
Namaste, Rajendra.
Question for you.
Yeah.
If seen according to Gita is dereliction of duty or avoiding swadharma, can you explain to me how can it be inherited as in Christianity that I am born in sin versus what I'm currently doing or I may do it versus I am born in sin?
Yes, yes. Of course, in Vedanta, as Swami Vivekananda said, in Vedanta, we don't accept the idea of sin. Now, that's a strange statement because right here, Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna that you will incur sin, papam avapsyasi. You will incur sin by not doing your duty. So what did Swamiji mean when he says in Vedanta there is no concept of sin? What he meant was that the word papa and the word sin are not exact translations of each other, because papa means that you are doing bad karma. And sin means that it is, as you said, it's something that's inherited all the way from Adam and Eve, from the creation of the world. God created the world. God was perfect, so he created a perfect world, but he wanted human beings to love him. And so he gave them free will. And once he gave them free will, then human beings chose the wrong thing. And so then sin entered into the world, and that has been passed down from generation to generation, so that all beings are sinful by their very birth. Their very nature has become sinful, and there's nothing they can do about it. Only God's grace can remove that sin. And that's why in the Christian belief, Jesus had to incarnate. They don't accept other incarnations because there's no need for another incarnation. The purpose of the incarnation of Jesus, according to them, not us, but according to them, was to save people from sin. Because now I can say that I believe in Jesus, and then Jesus will wash my sin away and will take me back to the Father. So in Hinduism, there's no concept like that at all. There's also no concept where sin in the Christian belief is an act against God. If you do something wrong, you steal, you lie, you kill, you do something immoral, you're actually doing it against God, because God gave the 10 commandments and said, these are the 10 things I want you to do, and so you must follow them. And I am disobeying God's law, meaning I'm disobeying God. So sin is against God. In Hinduism, there's no such idea. In Hinduism, papa means bad karma. I have done something wrong, something which is against the dharma, and I will have to suffer for it. Not because God hates me for doing something wrong, not because it's my nature to be sinful, but because of ignorance. I work as a karta, as an agent, facing choices of good and evil. And sometimes because of ignorance, I choose the wrong thing. And then I get the bad fruit coming back to me. And so the process in Hinduism is completely impersonal and on the individual. My nature is pure, perfect, and divine, even now. Even the murderer is pure divinity, but they're ignorant of it, and so they don't act on it. And so they do wrong things, which makes them experience wrong, bad karma. But eventually they're going to learn how to act rightly and manifest their inner divinity, because that's who they are. That's the reality. And that can't be hidden forever. So that's the basic difference.
And can I ask a follow-up question?
Okay, one more.
Yeah.
What about the concept of grace as it is in Christianity and also in Vaishnavism per se, where your papa is essentially wiped off by the grace, like Vallabhacharya's concept of pushti?
Yes, yes. So that in Hinduism also, I mean, of course, Vallabhacharya was Hindu. In Hinduism, we have that idea of grace. And the bhakti schools speak a great deal about grace. All of the bhakti schools, not just Vallabhacharya, but the Bengal Vaishnava school, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and others as well. And the reason for well, first, what grace means is that it's something that is undeserved, that God grants us something not because we earned it, but it's a free gift of God. So I've done bad karma, and I realize what I have done. And so I pray to God to wash me clean of it, because I realize that this was a big deal, something that I've done. Like you see in the, again, in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, where Mathur Babu was responsible for killing a man in his village. He didn't do it with his own hands, but he ordered his people to do it. And so he was in great trouble. He was going to, there was going to be an investigation. He could have been arrested. He could have been charged with murder. And so he went to Sri Ramakrishna and earnestly prayed, Baba, this is what I did. It was a terrible thing that I did. I'm sorry. Please protect me. And so Sri Ramakrishna scolded him severely and said, how could you allow your anger to take possession of you in such a way? Mathur Babu said, yes, but now what can I do? Please save me, Baba, please save me. And so then Sri Ramakrishna gave him assurance that he would be all right. And the case was dropped and everything came out in his favor. So that was an act of grace on the part of Sri Ramakrishna. Because he was an incarnation of God, he had the ability to grant him grace. And why did Sri Ramakrishna do it? Because he saw that Mathur Babu realized his mistake. He realized that his mistake and wanted to make amends for it. And so Sri Ramakrishna granted him grace. So that is, grace means that your karma can be, at least a portion of your karma, can be wiped clean through the grace of God. And so that is in Hinduism, that's in Christianity as well. The difference is that in Christianity, there's no way out of sin except through grace. There's nothing you can do to overcome sin. It's only God's grace. Whereas in Hinduism, we have both self-effort and grace. When you don't have grace, do self-effort. And then when grace comes, good. But don't wait for grace. First, do what you can do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So I think probably Rajendra, after Rajendra, I think Parthoda has a question for that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I-
please go
Okay,
ahead.
Partha.
Good morning. Good morning,
Good
Maharaj.
morning.
Yes. The second chapter, basically, the main summary or the main thing of the whole second chapter is express how our soul is, and it has been so wonderfully explained in many slokas, and some of them are number 23, 24, Nainang Chindati, Shastrani, etc. Now, this is so direct, because it is so difficult to explain the nature of soul. Nobody is there. Now, apart from our culture, like in Hinduism, how the other religions like Christianity, the Muslims, and other cultures, including Buddhism, Jainism, even our Indian religions, how do they explain the concept of soul, and that I am not my body, mind, intellect, and ego, that those things, so if the body dies, we don't die, the real I, all those things, what is your comparison with other religion? What do they think?
Yes. Well, now that's a very big question, and I have someone coming to see me at 11 o'clock, so I can't. That's a huge question to say what Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all of them are different. So basically, the Dharma traditions, that is, all of the traditions that come from India, have some sort of idea of the soul being different from the body and mind, except Buddhism, which doesn't accept the idea of soul.
No.
But the others, Sikhism, Jainism, they have the idea of the innate purity of the soul, and the different schools of Vedanta as well. Christianity has the idea that the soul was created pure by God, but it became infected by sin, and that only God can cure it. And so you're dependent on God to cure it. And God gave only one way to cure it, and that was by believing in Jesus Christ. And so that's something quite foreign to the Hindu tradition. We naturally have great respect for anyone like Jesus who led a divine life like that. But the idea that Jesus incarnated because humanity was sinful and that they needed a way to get out of sin, and you could do that by believing in Jesus, that whole thing we couldn't accept at all. So each tradition has some idea of the soul, but it differs a lot from tradition to tradition. So that will have to wait for another time.
Sure.
The question is good, just too big for right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So Swamiji, there is one question we will probably ask probably next time. So
Okay.
so for now, yeah.
Okay. I'll have to stop now because I have someone coming to the door
Yes, sure.
that had an appointment at 11 o'clock. So let me say a closing chant, and then I'll wish you all a good day. This is from the Gita Dhyanam. Om Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutastun Vandi Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapada Kramo Panishadair Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyantam na vidu suragana devaya tasmaye namaha. We bow to that supreme being whom Brahma and other gods praise with divine hymns, whose glories the singers of the Sama hymns sing through the Vedas and Upanishads, whom the yogis see with their mind absorbed in that through meditation, and whose end and beginning neither the gods nor asuras know. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Oh, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.